Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Coming Down to Earth with Spirit podcast with me, David Hale. Like with Season 1, we will continue talking about all things spiritual in a real and down-to-earth way. So I hope you can join me on my podcast journey so you can learn from my own spiritual journey and experiences with spirit in order to help you on your own spiritual journey and development. So join me now as we get into this episode. Well, hello again everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the Spirit Guides episode. If you haven't listened to part 1, I suggest you listen to part 1 first before listening to this part, because then it will make more sense listening to it in order. But if you did listen to part 1 already, I hope you found it useful, I hope you found it interesting. And just to recap what we talked about there, is we talked about what a spirit guide is, how many we have, what types of spirits or people now in spirit can be our guides, and who can tell us who our spirit guides are. So again, I hope that was useful for you and I hope it answers some of those questions that you may have had. But I do hope that you find this part 2, equally as interesting, because in this part we get more into the personal details of my journey with meeting my guides, and hopefully it will give you a realistic viewpoint of what it really is like to get to meet your guides, to identify them, to build that relationship with them, and also going to talk about how you can start to identify your own guides, how you can start connecting with them and building your own relationships with your spirit guide. So there's still a lot more to talk about, hence why I've split the episode into 2 parts, but bear with me, and I really do hope that you enjoy this and that you do find it useful. So let's start by talking about how you can identify who your guides are. And in part 1, I was very honest, and I did say that I don't believe that mediums should be the people to tell you who your guides are, as much as we would like that to happen because it's easier, isn't it? We think it's easier if someone just tells us who our guides are. But as I said, there's no actual validation that actually is your guide unless you've made that connection to your guide for yourself on some kind of level, and then the medium has just validated it. But look, there are some mediums out there who may be quite good at communicating with spirit guides and are able to bring through your spirit guides with validation that it is actually them. And at the end of the day, it's up to you, what you choose to do with that information. I always say to people, whatever the situation, whatever information you're given, just go with what you resonate with. If you feel like you resonate with that information, then go with it. And if you don't, it's also okay to say to yourself, okay, I've received the information. I'm not sure I believe it at this point, but I will wait for the validation and look out for those validations. And I'll talk about what I mean by the validations later on in the episode. So let's start talking about how we can start getting to know who our guides are and build that connection. So this is based on my own personal experience, but also what the general consensus out there is. And that is through meditation. So again, without sounding like a parrot, I'm going to say that by finding out who your guides are for yourself through meditation is probably the best way, because you know who you're connecting with. You'll be able to sense and feel, see, hear, and use all your senses yourself to understand who you've got working with you, rather than someone just telling you this is your guide and then you having to either believe that or not. So yeah, the process is through meditation, but look, it's going to be personal for everybody, right? Some people don't get on with meditation very well. Some people quite enjoy meditation. Some people are quite good at it. Some people are not so good at it. So the process will be different for everybody. So it's not necessarily a one thing fits all, right? So you have to, it's a bit of a trial and error sometimes, especially with meditation, because meditation is not a comfortable thing for a lot of people, because as humans, we're not conditioned to sit still and not think. But it really is a great way to start connecting with your guides. So if you're not so great at meditation, maybe it's starting to practice it, starting to try and get into that zone of clearing the mind, relaxing, not thinking about what's on your shopping list, not thinking about picking up the kids from school, not thinking about feeding the dog or whatever. It's able to take that time to yourself. And look, I understand it's difficult because these days we all have busy lives. We've always got something to do. But when it comes to connecting with your guides through meditation, it really is about removing those excuses and taking that time for yourself. Because to be completely honest, what I found is, like mediumship in general, it's about dedication and it's about commitment. So it's about getting a consistency with your practice of trying to connect with your guides. So I'm not saying you have to do it every day, but even if you take the same day each week to attempt that connection and keep that a consistent thing, then that's going to help you rather than do it sporadically. That's just my opinion. That's just my viewpoint on it. But again, it's different for everybody. But that's just how I connected with my guides. And I'll go into a little bit more of a story about that very shortly. But yeah, my advice would be is to set aside a dedicated time on a particular day to sit in the meditation with the intention of connecting with your guide. And that's just about sending your thought out to spirit and inviting them in, giving them permission to step forward, show themselves to you, and talk to them and ask questions to see what will come in at what will come into your mind at that particular point. And look, again, I'm not saying you've got to do it every day, but it's choosing a day, a time, but also importantly a place where you can be quiet, in a quiet space with no distractions, whether it be your bedroom, your living room, an office room, I don't know, your garage, your garden shed, whatever it might be. It's choosing a place where you know you're not going to be disturbed for however long. You don't have to, and when I say however long, I don't mean you have to sit in meditation for an hour, right? It could just be 10 minutes to start with, then build up to 15 minutes. But it's whatever you need to start making that connection. Now, the other thing I will say is, it's being patient with it. Meeting a new guide is not something necessarily that's going to happen instantly. You will get to know bits and pieces about them over time. And I compare meeting a guide to meeting a new person. So let's say, there's a new colleague has started at work with you. On the first meeting, the first time you meet them, you don't know everything about them at that point, right? But over time, over weeks, maybe over months, maybe over a year, you then get to know more about them. They don't tell you everything about themselves in one go. It's a process. It's like getting to know anybody new, whether it be a colleague or a partner or whoever, right? It takes time to get to know a person. And it's very similar with a guide, that they'll give you drips and drabs, little bits and pieces of information as they see fit. And that's a key point there. It's as they see fit, not as how you want it to be. Because like all spirit people, they also have free will, and they will give you bits and pieces of information that they think you need to know. And that's also important to say, because guides are not going to may not tell you, I won't say will not, they may not tell you every single thing about them, because that's not really important. The important thing is, the guide is there, and you know that they are there to assist you, support you in your life and in your development as a medium, if you are developing that way. So it's not getting frustrated if you don't receive what you think you should receive, because again, it's not up to us. So my guides have told me a name, but I don't know if that's actually their real name or not. It could be an alias, because that's just how they want you to refer to them, as to not put them on some kind of pedestal. Because for me, the way my guides are with me, they don't come through as all important and I'm more special than anybody else. They just come through as a supportive person in spirit to me. They come through as a supportive team, rather than call me this because I'm a high esteemed figure, call me this because I do. Do you know what I mean? So they don't put themselves on any pedestals. So if they give you a basic name like Bob, that is just how you refer to them. Their real name doesn't necessarily make a difference. As long as you know you've got some kind of information or awareness of them, I should say, then that's the important thing. Because there are some mediums out there who don't even see their guide. They know the guide is there, but they don't see them. Whereas other mediums have a great visual about what their spirit guides look like. there's a medium out there called TJ Higgs, who some of you might watch. She's got a podcast out as well. And I watched an interview with her, and she's one of her guides. She calls her the old hag. She doesn't know her real name, but because she looks a little bit like, for her, in her mind, a bit of like a haggard creature, I guess, haggard woman. So she's known as the old hag. But that's fine, because the name of that guy doesn't matter. The guy still works with her, but anything else is irrelevant as long as you're feeling that support from your guide. So it's important to say not to get too caught up on all the finer details, because you do see that, and I've seen that, and I did that myself. When my guides first started to step forward, I want to know what they look like, where they're from, how tall are they, how do they make me feel, what are they here and all that stuff, and actually realize that actually that's not really important. Again, as long as you've got an awareness of them and you understand why they're working with you, that's the main thing. But to know, what color are their eyes and what's their inside leg measurement, none of that is really important. So don't get too caught up on the details. So anyway, coming back to the connection with your guide, as I say, meditation is the best way, but it takes time. So on the first attempt, you may not get anything at all, but it's not letting that put you off. It's just being persistent with it, but not necessarily persistent, maybe more consistent with it, and just investing that time into making that connection. And then my suggestion would be is to journal and to note every attempt that you make. So the time, the dates, how you felt, what you received, if anything, just so you can track your progress. But then also, if you are getting bits and pieces of information coming to you, you can then start to build a picture over the weeks or months to really identify who that guide could potentially be. But also, if you journal when it was that you made that connection, you can then start to see, okay, so my connection is better when I'm meditating at this time, or on this day, or in this space. So you can then make that space your dedicated place of connection where you go to meet them. Where, some weeks you might sit in the living room, some weeks you might sit in the bedroom, or if you have a utility room or an office room. So if you note these things down, you'll then start to see what is the best time, day and place to have those connections. And what's also just dropped into my head as I'm talking, when I said earlier that meditation doesn't suit everyone, which is absolutely true, you might find that an alternative to sitting down in the quiet is to go for a walk. So go for a walk in nature, in a park or in a field or something, and just allow your thoughts just to drift away, which then allows spirit to come in and communicate with you. But again, it's going for a walk with the intention of connecting with your guide rather than just going for a walk for the sake of going for a walk, right? So that might help as well, because some people are not great at sitting still, as I said, but some people might connect better whilst they are going for a walk in nature, whether it's walking the dog or just going to clear the mind, get some fresh air. That can sometimes help with that connection as well. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's not a one size fits all. It's finding what works for you to give that connection to your spirit guides. And look, it might be again a trial and error thing. You might have to try, okay, let's try sitting still in the quiet, let's try going for a walk, let's try doing this, let's try, and so to see what works for you. So it really can be an experimental thing as well, but ultimately it is being patient with it, because it does take some people weeks, months, even years to connect with their guides, to really understand what they're about. So again, perseverance here, be patient, and know that they are there. But what I've also found during my journey, and I have the same conversation with other mediums that I know, is that your spirit guides will make themselves aware to you when they feel the time is right for you to receive that information. So again, it comes back to the free will of spirit and them deciding, okay, this person's ready to receive contact. This person's ready to know who I am, and I'm ready to identify myself to my student, you, right? For lack of a better phrase. So just keep that in mind, is that sometimes it is about the timing. Sometimes it's not about what we want. Sometimes it's about what we need when we need it. And your spirit guides will know that as well. But there's no harm in starting to make that initial connection, because that can say to your spirit guides, well, she's making that connection, or he's making that connection, so maybe they're ready to receive that contact. So it can kind of light that spark of, right, I'm ready to receive. Bring it on, bring it to me, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind. Now, as I promised earlier, I said I'd tell you a little bit about my guides as well and how I met them, just so you can get an understanding of the reality of what it's like to meet a guide. Now, I will say that I've been told in the past who my guides are. I remember going back to when I was about 18, 19, and I wasn't developing then, but I was interested in mediumship. So myself and my friend went to a spiritualist. It wasn't even a church. I think it was a village hall or something. And there was I can't even remember if it was a demonstration or what it was. But anyhow, I asked one of the ladies there, who I think was a medium, because I didn't know any better. I said to her, "Can you tell me who my guides are?" And she said, "You've got a samurai." It's a bit hard to say. A samurai warrior who works with you. She gave me a name, but I can't remember what the name is. And she said, when you hear a swoosh swooshing sound, that's your guide telling you that he's there. Now, hasten to add, I have never connected with that guide. I've never sensed him, never seen him, never felt him. So it's one of those occasions where I look back now and go, do you know what? She was spinning me a yarn there. She could see I was only 18, 19, and I didn't know any better. So I believe that she was just spinning me a bit of a tale. But I say I've never met that guide or whatever. And even since then, even the last couple of years, I've had several mediums say to me, "You're working with this guide, you're working with that guide," and they've all been different guides. So at this point, I've got 25 spirit guides. And I've also had the same medium tell me, like, on 3 different occasions, "You've got this guide, you've got that guide, you've got that guide." And then I'm thinking, well, if you truly are connected with my guide team or one of my spirit guides, surely there'd be a consistent guide coming through, not 3 different guides within 6 months of each other. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be careful. But I say, go with what you resonate with, because these guys that I've been told are working with me, I've never sensed them, I've never seen them. But then what you can also find is that, and I've heard this story from other mediums, is that when you're told by someone that this is your guide or that's your guide, what happens is you're so focused on looking for that guide who most of the time doesn't actually exist, is that you actually push out the guide that's actually trying to make contact. And I've heard that quite a lot. So it doesn't do you any favors, doesn't do your actual guide any favors. So that's why I always say it's more empowering for you to connect with your guides yourself by doing what I said a moment ago, by sitting in meditation or going for a walk or whatever. So because you will know what you feel, you will know what you will sense and what you will see, right, from your guides. So it's not getting too caught up on what other people are telling you as well. Make that connection for yourself. And that's exactly how I found out who my guides were. I sat in meditation. And they came through, and there were occasions where I wasn't sat purposefully asking for the guide to come in. So again, this is where it goes back to not one size fits all, and spirit will also show you themselves when they're ready, when they feel you're ready to receive the information. Because for one of my, I've got, how many guides have I got? At this point, I've got about 5 guides which work with me. Now, I don't know everything about every single one of them. I don't always feel every single one of them. So that's also something to keep in mind, that sometimes you're just not going to feel them or sense them because they've got other things to do upstairs. But if I look at Ricky, for example, now I was sat in meditation and Ricky had started to make himself aware to me. I'd never seen him before. And I actually sketched him, and I've got 3 of my guides that I drew in charcoal on my wall in front of me, actually, so I can visualize them that way as well. So Ricky turns out to be a Roman soldier, and yeah, he just came through meditation. I had one of those days where I thought, you know what, I need to just chill out. I've got too much stuff going on in my head. I'm just going to chill out. I'm just going to sit in meditation and just relax. And it was at that point I started seeing him in my mind, and I asked questions to get a bit more information about him. And so that's how my connection with Ricky started. But it's one of those things that when you first start connecting, you do start to think, is it my imagination? Have I pulled that in? Have I made this up? But you just have to trust what you are receiving. And that can also be a difficult part as well, because you think, am I going mad here? Have I now completely lost the plot? But validation about Ricky came later on to confirm that he was actually one of my guides. I'll talk more about the validation later, because I did say earlier on as well that I'll talk about the validations just so you know what kind of things to look out for. If I then talk about Patrick is also one of my guides as well. And Patrick also came through meditation. Again, I didn't go into meditation to link to a guide. I went in just to relax and just to calm the mind. And he stepped in and showed himself to me as well. And so I also sketched him on my notepad with some charcoal, and I've got him on my wall next to Ricky. So he came in that way as well. Sam, who's my healer guide, he also came in that way, and I sketched him as well. And then there is Dolly. Now, Dolly's a special case, but that's a really long story, and I don't want to bore you with it. So, Dolly, I think I did a podcast episode on Dolly, actually, if I remember correctly. But anyhow, yeah, the story of Dolly is in my book. So if you've read my book, you will know the story of Dolly. If not, my book is available on Amazon. Just a bit of a plug here. In paperback and ebook version, it's called Coming Down to Earth. So go and check it out. But Dolly made herself aware to me through a reading that I had at the very, very start of my development. And that was also confirmed a bit later on as well. So I've had validations for pretty much all of my guides, from looking at synchronicities and having those readings from some of those mediums who were able to link in with my guide and give me that validation. So although I've got quite a few guides, they've all got their own purpose, and they all work with me in a different way for a different reason. And you might find that as well. So if you've got more than one guide, you'll start to understand what they're actually doing for you. But that also took me a long while to understand that. So it's taken a number of years to really understand what their function is and what their purpose is for working with me. So if I take Sam, for example, he is a healer guide. So when I'm doing my healing therapies, he will work with me then. And then I mentioned Dolly, she's quite special to me, but Dolly, she is more of a motherly figure to me in the spirit world. She will look after me, she'll make sure I'm all right, and she will organize people in the spirit world. So if I'm doing a demonstration of mediumship, whether it be online or in a physical space, she will queue up all those people in spirit. I say to her, look, if there's a lot of people coming in, please queue them up, because I don't want to be bombarded all at once by 10 spirits at the same time. So she'll get them in a queue, she sorts them out. If I look at Patrick, for example, he is the wise one. So he will help me with my inspired writings, with my addresses that I have to do for divine services. And he'll give me any advice that I'm looking for. So if I want to sit in meditation and say, look, give me advice for today, or if I say, right, I need to write an inspired piece, please inspire me what to write, because he feels that where he comes from and what he does, he is a very wise man, and was very wise whilst he was living on this earth. So he brings that to me. If I look at Ricky, for example, Ricky is the one that gives me confidence. So if I'm having a bit of a wobble, or I feel like I can't do it, or I'm really nervous, because I do get nervous before any reading I do, any demonstration I do, I do get nervous. And I say to him, right, Ricky, I need your warrior kind of mentality, obviously being a Roman soldier. And he does that. And when I feel him step in, I know that he's got my back. He's saying to me, look, you've got it. Warrior pose, warrior stance, warrior mentality. You've got it. Go for it. You know you can do it. Have confidence. So that's what he does for me. And then I've got, who else have I got? So I've got, and Francis is also a new one. I won't go into too much detail about him because it's quite new, so I don't know so much about him. I just know as a monk. But yeah, if I need help during a demonstration, I will say to him, right, bring them in. So he will help bring them in as well, and he will also direct me if I need to. Now, I don't speak to my guides whilst I'm doing a reading, because I'm speaking to the spirit people who are wanting to connect with a loved one sat in front of me. So there might be some mediums out there who go to their guide gets information, the guide comes back to them. There's no point in doing that. Why would you do that? Just speak directly to the spirit person that wants to give the message, and that's what I do. But if I'm kind of not feeling anyone else step in, or I'm not sure where I'm going, I'll say to him, right, where am I going? Is it a male or female? And they'll tell me, and that starts off the communication. So it's there to help direct me as well. So they've all got their own function. Now, that's just how it works for me. It may work differently for other mediums out there. It's absolutely fine, because some mediums will refer to their guides as their main guide, their protector guide, their teacher guide. I don't work with my guides like that. I just see them as a team. They've got their own functions, and that works for me. So again, it's just going with what works with you, what works for you. It's not getting too restricted by what other people say you should do. Do what feels right for you. Go with the flow. Allow your spirit guides to advise you about how they want to work with you. Don't put yourself in a box to say, right, because that medium's told me to work that way, I need to work that way. No, you work how you work with your guides. So lastly, let's just talk about validations, because I keep going on about that. But for me, it was particularly important to actually validate that my guides were who my guides were. And to some people, they might be a bit like, well, you just said trust what's coming to you, which is true. You've got to trust what comes in. But just for me, I'm one of those people that I like things backed up with evidence or validation. So I know in my own mind that I'm not going completely mad, that I haven't lost the plot, or indeed that I haven't just made this thing up, right? I like to know the truth, but that's just me. So validations can come through either a medium saying to you, this is who your guide is, and you go, yes, I know, because I've already connected to them. Or it could just be little signs and synchronicities. So with Ricky, for example, because he was the first guy that really made himself aware to me, the next day I was walking home from work, and it was on my mind. I was thinking about it. I was questioning it. And as I was walking home, I felt him connect, and he gave me the word palazzo. Now, I am not Italian. I'd never been to Italy, so I don't know Roman history, so I wasn't aware what is a palazzo, right? So I did look it up, and I can't remember what it is, but I think the palazzos were buildings or something where the Romans were housed at one particular point in one part of Italy. And I went to bed with that on my mind. And I woke up the next morning, as you do, the first thing you do is you grab your phone to look at what's going on in the world. I remember clicking on Instagram. The first thing I clicked on was Instagram. The first picture that came up was of two guys, and where they were located I can't remember what it was, but it was something palazzo. And I was like, okay, well, I've just received my sign then. That, for me, that was my sign and my little synchronistic moment to confirm that Ricky was one of my guides, and he gave me that word, a simple one word, to validate that was him, because that's the first thing I saw the next morning. I woke up on a random Instagram post by two fellas I don't even know. So that was my little sign of synchronicity there. I then remember there was a point where, again, I was questioning things, and every time I looked at something, like if I turned on the TV, I opened a magazine or saw something on social media, there'd be a picture of a Roman soldier, right, randomly. So again, that just little signs and little synchronicities to say, yes, look, we're trying to tell you, David, that I am your guide. And then finally, during a session of transfiguration, which I won't really go into, you can look it up, but as I was doing a session of transfiguration with my church group, they told me that during the transfiguration, they could see almost like a soldier appear on my body. So they saw like a breastplate, they saw this red kind of cloak on me, they saw the big metal helmet that they'd associate with the Roman soldier, and I didn't tell them at that point that he was a new guide that was coming in. So again, it validated for me that, again, not that I needed more validation because I'd already had it, but again, it validated for me that he indeed was one of my guides. And so it's just looking out for, not necessarily looking out for them, because it's one of those things, the more you look for something, the more you miss it. Do you know what I mean? So it's just being patient with it and just allowing those signs to come through when spirit feel that you need that sign, if you are questioning things, if you're questioning things quite a lot. And with Patrick, right, this was validated by another medium. As I say, I have sketched my guides and they're on my wall in front of me, and no one else had seen them. And the way I'd seen Patrick in my head, I drew him looking, I didn't draw him with a particular race in mind, unlike Sam, who I knew was Afro-Venezuelan. So I sketched him with that in mind to get his features and that kind of thing right. And with Patrick, I was just inspired to draw him. And after I drew him, I looked at him and my other half said, "Is he Chinese?" I said, "I don't know. I just drew him as I drew him." So he's got long straight hair. He's got quite a thin moustache and a long flowing beard as well, right? And it was during a session I was doing, a development session I was doing at the church, and the medium said to me, "I've got your guide coming forward, and he looks Chinese. He's got long hair. He's got the moustache, the long beard, and for whatever reason, he's got I can see one of his ears." And my mouth fell open, because, I mean, you can't see the picture on this podcast, obviously, but the picture I drew of him, as I sketched him, I drew him with one ear sticking out. So his hair was brushed behind his left ear. Now, she'd not seen the sketch. I didn't even know I drew this sketch. They couldn't see it. I was on Zoom, and so my picture's on the wall behind the camera. So it wasn't like she could see the picture or had ever seen it. So this is just an example of when a medium can validate who your guide is. So in my case, I already had that connection. I already had an image of him from what I saw in my head, and she had described exactly the same thing. So those kind of validations can happen as long as you've already had some kind of connection to that guide. But I could go on and on about my guides, but this episode would be about 2 hours long. So I'm going to finish it there. Now, again, I hope that by talking about my own personal experience with guides, I hope it does help those of you who are looking at contacting your guides, developing that relationship with your guides. But again, it takes time to do that. Again, as I said at the beginning, it's like meeting someone new. You build a relationship over time and you get to know them over time. So just relax into it. Don't get too caught up in, I need to know this now, I need to know that now, I must know this information, I must know that information. Just let it come as it's supposed to come. But yes, I think I've talked enough for this episode. But again, I do hope it's helped. Thank you as always for listening. And until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon. Well, there you have it. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and you found it interesting. There are plenty more episodes to come, so stay tuned, and I'll speak to you all soon.